Welcome back to App Stories. This week's episode is brought to you by Notion. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John, and Happy New Year, I guess.
Happy New Year to you, too. After a couple of weeks off, we're back and in the saddle and podcasting once again. And we thought we would go back to one of our favorite episode formats, which is the Pick Two. We're gonna talk about a couple of apps each that we've been experimenting with. These are either apps, I guess, that we're trying and have really caught our interest, or maybe a hidden favorite that we haven't talked about much anywhere. So I don't know. Do you want to start, or do you want me to dive in here?
Yeah, but before we dive in, we should mention that typically we do a pre-show segment of App Stories Plus.
That's true. Very true.
For App Stories Plus subscribers. This week, we're doing a post-show segment with some additional picks. So that will be at the end of the episode rather than at the beginning of the episode. And where can people subscribe to App Stories Plus, John?
Well, they can go to appstories.plus, or they can go to plus.club, because you can either subscribe individually to App Stories Plus by itself, and that's the appstories.plus URL, or you can make it part of a Club Premier membership, which includes App Stories Plus, but all of the stuff we do over at Club Mac Stories. So if you go to that URL, plus.club, you can learn all about what all those things are, as well as sign up. So that would be great. We'd love it if you would check those things out in the new year for us.
Perfect. So do you want to go first with your pick? This is an app I never heard of before. This is totally new to me. I don't know what you're doing.
So I have been on a quest. My quest, I'm very intrigued by the idea of listening to saved articles. Readwise Reader has this, and Matter has this, but I really don't like the fact that those apps are silos. I really what I want to do is I want to create a podcast feed of things that I save that's just for me. That's essentially what I'm trying to get to. And Matter comes pretty close to that, but not exactly that, because you have to listen to it in the app and you don't have CarPlay support, stuff like that. So I was looking around, and I've been experimenting with some things in Shortcuts with a beta app that I've been testing, where it might ultimately be possible to do this. But in the meantime, I was looking to see, has anybody else come up with an app where you can turn web content into audio? And sure enough, there's an app called Natural Reader. And this is an app that does a very nice job of converting all sorts of content into audio that you can listen to in the app or elsewhere. So it's got a whole set of voices. There's a couple of different subscription levels here. You can try it out for free, but there's also kind of non-AI voices, which are okay, but not amazing. And then really some very good AI voices. And it can be a pretty expensive subscription. I think the highest tier is a little bit over $100 a year. So this is not a cheap solution necessarily. It's less expensive if you go with the non-AI voices. But what you can do is it's got a share sheet extension, which we talked about before our Christmas break about how the share sheet could be improved. But this is a really nice implementation where you're on the web, you're looking at an article, you just send it to Natural Reader. And what it does is something kind of cool, which I think is one of the harder bits of this, which is it strips out all the stuff that would sound terrible. So for instance, if you sent like a markdown file to something that was going to read it out loud, you'd have all that extra syntax. You'd have the asterisks for the italics and the bold. You'd have the brackets. You'd have the URLs. And if you're listening, you really don't want that stuff. You want something that sounds more like, just the body text of an article. And it has the ability to filter that out. And you actually have some control over what gets filtered and what doesn't get filtered. And everything is saved as a PDF, basically. So you can go into the app and you can either just listen, or you can follow along as it highlights the text as you read it and do things like highlight it and take notes. It can be like an actual learning tool beyond just kind of like a stand-in for a podcast feed. But beyond just sending it things using the share sheet, you can send it text files, PDFs, photos, things you scan with your iPhone camera. All of that can go into Natural Reader and then be read back to you. which is pretty cool. Now, the thing that really caught my eye, I don't really care that much about things like highlighting. They also have bookmarking too, by the way, and the ability to play back just the highlights if you want. What I got really excited about, though, is the fact that you can export MP3s, because that means you can save those into the Files app and then listen to them somewhere else. Now, you can't just like bring random audio into the Apple Podcasts app. And with Overcast, though, you could do that through Marco's web app, or through Castro, you can do it with their ShareSheet extension. But there's another option, which this is gonna be kind of my bonus pick. This is not my my post-show bonus pick, but it's kind of my ancillary bonus pick for everybody, which is an app called Everyword, which is an audiobook player that works with DRM-free audiobooks. And what's nice about an audiobook player for this kind of thing is that you can pause and then come back to it and pick up where you left off. I mean, that's not how a music player that's not how a music player works. It's how a podcast player works. And you can use Everyword then to listen to these things. And I believe Everyword has a CarPlay integration. So it kind of ticks all the boxes for me, except for one thing, which is that export to MP3 requires you to go into the app and tap around a bunch to get to the export feature and save the MP3 somewhere. Now, Everyword can be pointed at a folder, so that stuff will just show up in there. You don't have to do anything special on that end. But I emailed the Natural Reader developers right away and said, you really need shortcut support here so that I can take everything that's in your app and export it as an MP3 elsewhere. Just a really simple action, but haven't heard back from them, so I don't know. I mean, I would say like on the downsides of this app, one is that lack of shortcut support. Also, it's a very non-native UI. It's very cross-platformy looking, which isn't great, but it's not super terrible either. So I haven't pulled the trigger and subscribed to this myself yet, because I'm still looking around, asking around, trying to figure out ways to get web content converted to audio and then exported out as an MP3 somewhere. So if any listeners have any suggestions for that, or any solutions that can be largely automated so that I can just point an audiobook reader to a folder on my iPhone, I would love it, because that's kind of where I'm trying to get.
How did you discover Natural Reader? Just by browsing the App Store?
I was going to say, I have no idea. I think that's how I did. I think it was either that or I think it was just by browsing around and doing some searches, because I've been looking for, I figured with all these new the text-to-speech APIs that OpenAI has, that we'd start seeing a flood of these kind of apps. This one's actually been around for a while. It's on a bunch of different platforms. I mean, I suppose that's an advantage too. I think it's on Windows and Android, and there's a web app too. So there's a lot of things, a lot of ways to get things into it. But it is kind of expensive, and it doesn't have that automation that I really want. That's like the last piece of the puzzle that I haven't figured out. And if I can't figure that out, I may subscribe to Natural Reader. I just want to give it a try and see if that's a way for me to kind of get through more of the stuff that I save, instead of letting some of it just kind of go and fall by the wayside.
This is an interesting workflow you want to put together.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. My first pick for this classic episode of App Stories, for the first episode of 2024, gosh, I gotta get used to saying that.
It's hard to say that, yeah.
It's hard to say that. It's about video games. My first pick is about video games.
Of course.
And it is Game Track. So the Game Track is an app we've covered, that John has covered multiple times on Mac Stories before. And I was sort of led to rediscovering Game Track because I have a problem, John. And that problem is I need to tame my video game backlog.
Your backlog is just too big.
My
I know how that
backlog
feels.
is huge. Way too many interesting games. See, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it
because
is.
way too many interesting and really good games have come out in 2023. And I want to play them all because I am curious to try them all. I love video games and I love playing on different consoles and different form factors. And so I have all these games, both AAA games and indie games that I want to play. And I realized that I was looking for something that the previous solutions that I was using, I used a bunch of apps to track my video games, like on the Nintendo Switch, I used SwitchBuddy, and then I used the Excellent Sequel, which is this like a multifunctional sort of media tracker, kind of similar to Sofa, which is another media tracker for iOS devices. But I was looking for something a little more dedicated to video games. And the reason I started using GameTrack is because it supports this idea of multiple states for games in your library that you can also organize in lists. So let me explain. GameTrack has all these different screens where you can go in and discover video games. And it's got this beautiful design where you open a video game page and it tells you a bunch of details. There's screenshots, videos, artwork, there's a poster. It tells you details about the platform, about the release date. And it even integrates with a great service, How Long to Beat, which is this website that gives you this like overview of, well, how long it's going to take you typically to beat the main story of a game or the game and the side quests.
Oh, that's
or
cool.
If you're a completionist, if you want to 100% the game. And GameTrack integrates with How Long to Beat to give you that information. Fun fact, as I was looking for, and this is going to surprise you, John, as I was doing my research about these video game tracking apps, I also came across, you will never guess this, IGN, the popular video game review and news website, has an app for iPhone and iPad called Playlisty for keeping track of video games. And I'll tell you, John, it's surprisingly not bad at all for
How
being
is that
an
even
app,
possible?
for being an app made by a web. You know, these apps made by big websites.
They're always bad.
This one is pretty good. This one is pretty good because it integrates. It's very clever because it integrates with IGN. So from the reviews and from the collections put together by the writers at IGN, you can save a video game to your library. It supports multiple states. It syncs across devices, it supports signing with Apple, and it lets you also check out stats from How Long to Beat. It's an interesting app. It's not as great as GameTrack, though. I'll give you that. And the reason why I'm playing around with GameTrack again, so I've rebuilt my video game backlog, and when you do, you add games to your library. And when you add a game to your library, the game can either be completed, so you can say, I'm done with this game, I just want to save it and archive it, or you can say, this game is in progress, or you can say, this game I have abandoned. I played it, I stopped playing it, I will now return to this game. So that flexibility of having like multiple statuses for games is great. But where GameTrack really shines is when you combine this sort of high-level organization of the status of a game with your own lists. So for example, let's say that technically I have a bunch of games in progress. For example, right now, I want to finish Sea of Stars, but I also have a bunch of side quests that I got to finish in Tears of the Kingdom. I also need to finish Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and I also need to finish, and I'm almost right there at the end, Metroid Prime Remastered. Now, technically, all of these games are in progress. I have not abandoned them. I've been playing them, and I need to finish them. However, of these 4 or 5 games, only one is the game I'm actively playing on a day-to-day basis, which is Sea of Stars. With GameTrack, I can put together a list called Paused. And all the games that are in progress, I can drag into the Paused list. Then,
that's a good idea.
GameTrack supports smart lists that are put together just like in reminders. When you create a list, there's a button that says, make this a smart list. And when you do, you can mix and match multiple criteria. So what I did is I created a list called active but paused, and another one called active and playing. And what you do is you basically combine 2 filters. For the active but paused, actually, I guess the one I'm using more is the active and playing. I just did, for example, status is in progress, list is not paused. You put together these 2 filters and you have a smart list in GameTrack that gives you a complete overview of, okay, what are the games that I'm actually playing right now and what is everything else that is in progress, but at the moment it's on pause. I gotta get back to it eventually. So that ability to organize and really fine tune with filters without having to do tagging or searches, like that I find really beneficial to the way my brain works in terms of how I think about video games. And then, of course, there's the backlog, and you can queue games for your backlog. So that's where Baldur's Gate, Lies of P, Vemba, all these other games that are Jusant, like all these other games that I want to check out eventually, they go into my backlog. And GameTrack just rolled out their Backlog 2024 challenge, where you set a number of games that you want to try and complete in 2024. And as you complete games, you see this progress bar fill up in the GameTrack UI.
Well, that's a cool idea. It's a little bit like a habit tracker, but for video games.
Yes. I set a goal of 10 games that I want to complete in 2024. And I think I will be able to beat it, especially with these smaller indie games that take like 5 to 10 hours to complete. So yeah, and GameTrack is great for all the other reasons that you mentioned before on Mac Stories. It supports signing with Apple, syncs with iCloud. There's a GameTrack Plus subscription that unlocks even more functionality. There's multiple app icons to choose from. The app is very cleanly designed. And I guess it is the app for a very specific type of brain, the person who likes to over-organize things, because that makes you feel good about knowing that you are organized and you see everything in one place. So that's
one idea that I have is that I would make a smart list that also included a variable for where I'm playing it, because I have so many.
You can do that. You can do that.
Yeah, see, that's what I would.
You can filter by platform. There's even a separation between PC and Steam Deck.
That's good, because I have this problem of when I put things on pause, like you're describing, is that sometimes I forget where I'm playing it, and I actually have it available in multiple places. Maybe it's on Game Pass, and maybe I was, it's just nice to kind of have some of those details. It makes it easier to jump back into something. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Notion. Notion combines your notes, docs, and projects all together in one beautiful space. And navigating that space is easier than ever thanks to Notion's new feature, Q&A. Q&A is an AI assistant that can answer your questions about next quarter's roadmap, find the marketing campaign proposal you're looking for, or dig up a long-lost link, all in seconds. And really, that is what Notion's all about. It's about keeping you organized, but keeping you organized in a way that lets you retrieve all the information you store in it quickly, which not every app does well, because you can really store an enormous amount of stuff in Notion, yet it's always easy to find your way around and get what you want. I've been using Notion for, probably 3 years now. I don't even remember any longer exactly how I discovered it. But what's kept me sticking around for using it with things like our show notes for App Stories and for Mac Stories Unwind is that it's very easy to share with another person, very simple to create a fast and quick outline, and super simple to retrieve that information through search, as well as displaying it in a bunch of different ways. And now with Notion AI, Notion can give you instant answers to your questions too, using information from across your wiki, projects, docs, and meeting notes. If you have an urgent question that you'd normally turn to a coworker to answer, just use Q&A instead. It'll search through thousands of documents in seconds and answer your question in clear language, no matter how large and complex your workspace is. You can also use Q&A questions from anywhere in Notion, so you can find exactly what you need without leaving the doc you're in right now, and stay focused on what's important. When you use Notion AI, it's even easier to do your most meaningful work. Try Notion AI for free when you go to notion.com/appstories. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/appstories to try the powerful, easy-to-use Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. That's notion.com/appstories. Our thanks to Notion for their support of the show. All right, Federico, my second pick is not a game. It's an app called Mirror Play.
Speaking of video games.
Yes, it is video game related, just like your pick. So not too long ago, you mentioned to me that a very popular Android app called PS Play was in development for the Steam Deck. And I started looking into PS Play because it's pretty well known as a way to remotely play your Sony PlayStation games, and that it's faster and more performant and has more features, frankly, than you can get with the official Sony app. Because, Sony makes an app that you can use to play your PlayStation on your phone remotely on your network, but it takes a while for it to connect to your PlayStation. I think it's limited to 720p, and it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles in terms of the kinds of settings you can do. And PS Play sounds like it's a lot better on Android. So I started poking around thinking, what if PS Play were available on iOS? I wonder. And so I searched on the App Store, and I didn't find PS Play. I found something called Mirror Play, which is PS Play, not called PS Play because probably App Review decided that PS is PlayStation and it shouldn't be called that, but it's essentially that app for iOS now because it's the same developer. And it has what you would expect. It allows you to play your games remotely on your PlayStation. It's not just limited to PS5. You can do the PS4 too. It has resolutions up to 1080p. With the PS5, you can do the HEVC encoding and HDR. It has a bunch of other settings that you can do, all kinds of things like customizing the on-screen button layout. Now, I don't recommend really playing games like that, console games on your phone with an overlaid set of buttons because I think it's just too hard and not enjoyable. I think a controller is really necessary, but if you don't have one and you do want to play with the controls and you're good at playing with the controls, you can customize it however you'd like. It can also do things like it can mimic the motion sensor in the DualSense controller, so you have some gyroscopic control there, and it also mimics the haptics of the DualSense controller using the iPhone's haptics. Now, it's not the same. I don't think it's as realistic feeling or as detailed feeling as it is on a DualSense controller, but it's better than not having it at all. And so I've been playing around with this now, not a lot yet. I've only had it for, 4 or 5 days. And I did notice some frame rates problems dropping, which I don't think PS Play has nearly as many of from what I've read. So I think that maybe this app needs a little bit more love and attention. I'm sure that Android is a platform that a lot of people are doing emulation on and doing other things with video games. So I'm sure that is a priority. And I'm sure the Steam Deck is a priority now too, since that has become so popular. But Mirror Play came out about 9 months ago. It's had 6 updates in those 9 months, so it's being fairly actively developed. So I'm encouraged by what I've seen so far, and I'm going to keep it on my phone and continue to use it and see where it goes, because if I can play on something other than my iPhone, I will. But sometimes your iPhone is what you've got with you. You've always got it with you. So sometimes it is the best place to play a game, whether you're doing streaming or whether you're playing a game right on the phone itself. So this app is free, but there are some of the more advanced controls require an in-app purchase of $5.99.
Very well. It's a really interesting space now with remote play. I think
it is.
Too bad, John. I haven't told you this. I cannot use my PlayStation 5 right now because we put up the Christmas tree right in front of the cabinet where I typically open because my PS5 is inside. And, for ventilation, I want to keep it open when I play games, but now there's the Christmas tree in front of it. So I guess that for the whole holiday season, I will be unable to play PS5 games because the Christmas tree is in front of it, which is unfortunate. I really don't feel comfortable, knowing that my PS5's fans will spin up inside of a closed cabinet. But hey, that's... the Christmas tree, we put it up for 3 weeks a year, and it's fine. I'll live without it for a few weeks. So my second, maybe I should put a PS5 in another closet, like not underneath the TV at all. Sylvia will kill me if I
You
do
should
that.
put it in there with your router in that special closet you have.
I don't want to do that. Didn't Sony? You know what Sony should make again? Oh gosh, it was like years ago. Do you
What?
remember back in the PS Vita days?
Yeah.
They made, what was it called?
Oh,
PS TV.
I know what you're talking
It
about.
was
The thing
like
for the TV.
It was like imagine a headless Mac Mini, but actually
Yeah.
a PS Vita. That it was just like you connected to a TV and people were using it for remote play on a PS Vita.
Yep.
They should. I'm intrigued by the idea of like, imagine if there was like a box that was a PlayStation 5, but without TV out, just remote play. That'd be interesting. Or maybe not. Anyway,
Now you're making me Google to see what that thing is called. I don't even remember what
I think it was called PS TV. I think it was the PS TV,
Oh,
and it was a
yeah, I
PS
think so.
It was slightly different. It was different from what I'm thinking about. It was a box that you connected to a TV to play
Right.
PS Vita games on a TV, and you could use the DualShock 4 as a controller.
Yeah, and I think it did like TV and movies and stuff like that too. It was like a whole desktop, whole TV set solution. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So my second pick is Launcher. This is another app that's been around for a while, and I actually wrote about it in the last issue of Mac Stories Weekly for 2023, issue 399. We have issue 400 coming up at the beginning of the new year, and in that issue, I wrote about Launcher and why I'm intrigued by Launcher again, specifically to launch shortcuts and apps. Because of this problem that I have, I spent some time rethinking my home screen. I want to share my home screen in issue 400 of Mac Stories Weekly, as it's a nice milestone. And usually with these milestones, I like to share my home screen. And the thing is, I realized, and you know this about me, John, that I naturally gravitate toward being, as much as possible, a single home screen kind of guy.
Right.
I don't like having multiple pages for the simple reason that I forget that I have multiple pages on my home screen and I forget that I can swipe to access more widgets. So the more information I can cram on a single page, the better. The problem is that the current design of iOS, the grid layout of the home screen and the dock, does not allow you to put as many icons as you could, for example, on an Android device. And at the same time, if you are a shortcuts person, like I am, the smallest shortcuts widget only lets you use two shortcuts at the same time. In the small square shortcuts widget.
Yeah, I think they did that just to spite us, because it's like, what's going on with having two rectangular small shortcuts? It's very odd to me that that's not a grid of 4.
Used to be that you could only do one.
I know.
The small shortcuts widget. Now that lets you do two. Wait long enough, it's going to be 4. All right.
Another 5 years and we'll get our 4th.
Just give them a few years. It's going to be 4. Anyway, with Launcher, you can create these small shortcuts, these small widgets. And if you are a Launcher Pro customer, you can tweak the size of these launchers and make them really tiny, but still tappable, really tiny. Imagine, John, having 6, 8, or even 12 launchers in the same small widget, which is exactly what I've been doing for the past few days. And you've seen a screenshot of my home screen, the kind of thing that I've been doing. And so the idea is I can put in the space where Apple will let me put 4 icons, I can put 8 or 12. And that is allowing me to stop a lot of launchers on a single home screen. There is a downside, though, specifically for shortcuts, which is the experience of running shortcuts from Launcher. Yeah. It's not as nice as running shortcuts from the Apple widget.
Right.
And that's because the Apple widget is interactive, whereas the Launcher widget, even though they have this nice sort of integration that lets you easily import your existing shortcuts, the big issue there is that those shortcuts, they do not run in line within the home screen. They open the Shortcuts app. And that's because on iOS and iPadOS, there is no API for developers to run a shortcut directly as there is one on the Mac. Unfortunately, on iOS and iPadOS, developers cannot say, I want to run this shortcut without opening the Shortcuts app. It's not possible on the iPhone and iPad. So, as I detailed in Mac Stories Weekly, again, issue 399, I came up with a nice workaround to make the experience better, to run a shortcut from the launcher widget and return to the home screen. You can check out that story for details on how I'm doing it. But yeah, that's why I'm checking out Launcher again, because it's a very sort of power usery way to stuff a lot of information in a small widget. And I've also put together launchers for apps. You can do folders now in Launcher. You can simulate the home screen transparency effect. So basically, these launchers, they look like they are integrated with your home screen wallpaper. They don't have a background. You can do this little trick to simulate transparency with your wallpaper. And now these folders, they even have a setting in Launcher to close automatically. And this is super nice because you put together a launcher widget, and then you create a folder inside that launcher thanks to interactive widgets in iOS 17. When you tap that quote-unquote folder, you're basically interacting with the widget. And if you launch an app from the, again, quote-unquote folder, there's an option for that folder to close automatically so that the next time you go back to the home screen, you will be back at the root level of the launcher widget.
Right, because it's just redrawing a different view. Because
exactly.
It's yeah. That's exactly. That's the whole thing similar to what David Smith is doing with some of his stuff and other things. So that's really clever, though. I mean, I think that's a great way to handle it. And I've been feeling some of this myself, especially with shortcuts, because I've just got a lot of simple shortcuts that save me little bits of time here and there, and I feel like I'm not getting as much use out of them as I should on my iPhone because it's just too much of a hassle to dig around for them sometimes. And I don't want to use a giant widget because screen real estate is at such a premium on the iPhone that the idea of having 12 in a little one makes a lot of sense. I use small widgets on my home screen too, just like you do. Little different arrangement. I've changed my home screen too, Federico. I don't know if I've shown you yet, but we'll have to do our
John
home screen soon.
John has been keeping secrets from me, listeners. You should know. John has been keeping many surprises from me.
I have a long list of surprises, Federico. The first one will be soon.
Oh, I saw that in the monthly log. But I guess this is weird because we're talking about the future, but we're actually in the past.
Yes.
So, but yeah, John has been up to a bunch of things, I guess. But yeah, so Launcher, really great utility. I believe the developer is working on even better music playback launchers.
Oh, good.
That run in line, just like Widgetsmith, that start music playback from the home screen. So yeah, this is a fun project to rethink the home screen for more information density. Hopefully, in iOS 18. A bunch of these things will be made unnecessary, either because Apple will finally let us customize the density and of the grid layout of the home screen even more, or even better, because finally they will allow developers to invoke shortcuts natively without URL schemes. I mean, Launcher is still, to run those shortcuts, is still using a URL scheme, which is so 2013.
It really is. It really is. Although, URL schemes at one point with shortcuts, we thought they might die, but they still have a lot of utility.
Still around. Apple is still using X callback URL, which is incredible. It's a third-party library from like 15 years ago or something.
Yeah, I know. Crazy.
Created by Greg Pierce, the creator of Drafts.
Greg. And I know that one of the first people who used it was Marco Arment with Instapaper back in the day. That's kind of where it all kind of got started, I think. So that's pretty cool.
See, we know things about apps.
We're the old men of the App Store.
Yeah. Well, that's a classic pick too, John. Once again, our picks were Natural Reader, because John wants to listen to articles saved from the web as spoken by an AI voice, and Mirror Play. And I picked Gain Track and Launcher. Classic pick too.
Yep. Fantastic set of apps. And everybody who is an App Stories Plus subscriber or a Club Mac Stories Premier member, stick around because we've got each one more pick that we want to share with everybody. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode. That was Notion. And you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net, We're both on Mastodon. Just go to viticci.macstories.net and johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you later, Federico.
Ciao, John.